what is experience? What is the experience of being a person in communication? What do we do with experience? What are the limits and possibilities of understanding others? Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Antibarakis, a PhD student in Development Communication. In this video, we will discuss one of Craig's traditions in communication theory, the Phenomenological tradition. Here, we will talk about the tradition, a theory that falls under it, and a study that applied the theory. Now, derived from the field of philosophy, the Phenomenological tradition theorizes communication as dialogue or the experience of otherness. In this tradition, dialogue defines what authentic communication is, which is based on direct, unmediated contact with other people. Craig, in 1999, says that communicative understanding starts with pre-reflective bodily experience in a shared world of life. As a result, this tradition involves looking at things and situations through a personal lens. It is intuitive in the sense that a person strives for authenticity by removing biases from discourse. Even though it might be hard or even practically impossible, phenomenologists think that a person's beliefs shouldn't affect what they say. Also, the phenomenological tradition stresses that conscious, goal-seeking, no matter how well-intended, destroys discourse by putting one's own goals and strategies in the way of direct encounters with oneself and others. Here, the absence or the failure to sustain authentic human relationship is problematized. Words like experience, self, other, dialogue, authenticity, supportiveness, and openness come up a lot in this tradition. It stresses that people should treat each other like people, I-thou perspective, and not like things or I-it. The tradition emphasizes how important it is to respect differences and look for common ground so that people don't become too divided or polarized. It's very common these days, right? Phenomenologists say that reciprocity and not being in charge make for the most satisfying human interactions. The phenomenological tradition challenges the idea that communication is a skill and that facts are objective and values are subjective. Because to this tradition, every conscious experience could be both objective and subjective. Like the rhetorical tradition, phenomenology tries to find a common ground between people with different points of view in order to build rapport. It also shares the semiotic tradition's belief that intersubjective understanding is the main problem in communication. Phenomenology, on the other hand, does not agree with the rhetorical tradition that communication needs creativity and strategy. In the same way, it goes against the semiotic tradition, which says that signs are the only way to understand something. Martin Buber's timeless essay, Dialogue, which came out in 1947 and was updated in 2002, has a passage that defines dialogue as a real movement toward the other. Buber makes a distinction between dialogue and different kinds of monologue, or what he calls as false dialogue. He gives an example as debate or even friendly banters or chit-chats, and then applies this to questions of community in modern group and organizational life. In the early 20th century, when Buber's essay is set, large-scale industrialization, mass communication, and impersonal bureaucracy slowly took over society. Real human relationships seemed to be happening less and less, and they were in danger from fake conversations that looked like real ones. Buber points out the difference between observing someone on the surface and really knowing them. When two beings face each other and feel that they are both aware of the other, they can talk to each other. Buber says that the main purpose of dialogue is to focus on the other person, while the main purpose of monologue is for reflection or putting the focus on oneself. The I-thou relationship between two people is kept when they talk to each other. Buber says that people who disagree can talk with each other if they are both really interested in what the other has to say. Mark Orbis' co-cultural theory is an example of a phenomenological tradition theory. The co-cultural theory is a theoretical framework that was made in the 1990s. It shows how members of a community who have traditionally been on the outside talk to each other. Orbeck calls the groups that are on the outside co-cultural groups. It is a unique theory because it looks at communication from the point of view of people from groups that don't get much attention. Simply put, the idea tries to explain when people from the same culture see differences between cultures as important. It is meant to help people understand how people from the same culture deal with people from other cultures. As an example of a phenomenological tradition, co-cultural theory allows the researcher to get to the heart of what it means to be different. With phenomenology, you can look at how people talk about and think about their own experiences. The idea helps the researcher understand marginalization in a bigger picture, which he or she would not have been able to do with quantitative research alone. Now, there are 5 assumptions that form the basis of the co-cultural theory. The first one is that every society has a social structure that favors some groups. Second is that it's based on varying degrees of privilege. There are dominant members occupying positions of power that allow them to build and uphold systems that reinforce their viewpoints and experiences, while silencing those of the others. The third assumption is that the goal of dominant communication systems is to keep cultural group members away from the center of authority or power. Fourth is that co-cultures can be very different, but they always share a core. From this, there are 6 factors that influence a co-cultural group's choice of communication strategies. First is the field of experience, which refers to a person's entire life, including family history, childhood, upbringing. Every person's experience contributes to a bigger field of experience that influences how we communicate today. It is a collection of experiences that shapes how we communicate. As emphasized in the phenomenological tradition, the co-cultural theory also stresses that no co-cultural member has the same field of experience. Second is situational context. Adaptive choices that are made in view of a specific circumstance or situation. third is abilities. These are the physical and psychological attributes that affects a culture's communication ability. Then we have perceived costs and rewards, or the pros and cons related to the actions undertaken. We also have communication approach, which refers to the manner by which an individual or group engages in the discourse, whether it's assertive, aggressive, or non-aggressive. And lastly, the preferred outcome, or the behavior that will produce the desired outcome. Now, there are three basic types of desired outcomes. Assimilation, which refers to blending in and getting rid of cultural differences. Next is accommodation, or trying to encourage and strengthen collaborative qualities. And lastly, separation, wherein someone is attempting to avoid any significant interaction with the dominant culture. When these desired outcomes and communication approaches are put together, they make different co-cultural communication strategies. These strategies are shown in this matrix. Ofina et al. From the College of Mass Communication at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, did a local study that used Orbe's co-cultural theory. The co-cultural theory was used as a starting point for a study called A Study on the Co-Cultural Communication Orientation of Filipino Kasambahays Negotiation of Days Off. This study looked at 1. The extent and nature of the power relationships between the kasambahays and their employers. Second, the communication strategies the kasambahays use to negotiate for their days off. And third, how the kasambahays make sense of the power relationships. According to the co-cultural theory, the kasambahays are the co-culture group in this study because they don't have much control over their lives in relation to their employers, whose culture is called the dominant culture. With its focus on authentic communication through dialogue, phenomenology has a lot of room to be used in development communication, which is all about people in the first place. A phenomenological tradition can be used to shed light on things like diversity, identity, class, sexuality, and even religion that have to do with development. Thank you very much for your attention.